Welcome back to Release Your Inner Power podcast. I have a special guest with us today. Her name is Adrienne. She's going to be sharing her story and a little bit about how she can help mamas. I'm excited to share it here. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I know I'm so excited for you to be here. I love it. I love it. It looks like it's sunshiny where you are today. It's also sunshiny where I am at.
Yeah, I feel like it's the first time in a while, and I'm super excited about it.
I know I want to get outside and enjoy the sunshine.
Right? Exactly.
So tell us about Adrienne. Tell me about a story of who you are and how you are, Adrienne
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Michigan, but ended up in St. Louis. My dad's a car guy. And so I basically I'll just start with like got married, had kids, did the thing. Um and I was doing accounting and I was kind of in my normal life work. It was fun for me. I'm kind of a little numbers nerd and I love getting to zero, so it worked for me. And but the whole time I always thought I'd be a career girl, right? Like I would keep doing that. And then we decided to have kiddos and I held my little man in my arms and I was like, "Oh, no. No, mama doesn't want to be a career girl anymore. Mama wants to be with a baby." And honestly, I was like kind of younger. I was like, I'm never going to have kids, right? So this is like I'm sure my mom was like, "What is going on here?" um but life just completely changed, like I know people say it all the time and a lot of people don't believe it, but you just don't know what you're going to do until you have a baby in your arms. And so I decided that I had at the time it was called there was a company called Homemade Gourmet and I had an in-home party and I was like, I'm going to just do this for fun, like just try it. And I've been selling food ever since in direct sales. And then a couple years ago, I just wanted to share my love of direct sales and my passion of growth, personal growth. And so I started my own podcast, Adrienne Talks. And a lot of that came with the growth that I had from that day I had that boy in my arms until 16 years later, which is where I'm at right now. He's 16 years old. So it's just been such an amazing journey of, you know, growth and self discovery, I guess. So I was a whole different person then.
I love that. I love that how you said, "Oh no." Like as soon as you held them, you're like, "This is no. I want to
Oh,
be home. I want to be with my babe."
yeah, it was just it's crazy. I mean, I honestly can't tell you because I say that all the time. If somebody in college would have told me I'd have kids and be in direct sales, I would have laughed at them for both things. And here I am just living my ideal life. So it's kind of like sometimes you just got to sit back and let life come to you and learn as you go and just grow from each thing and realize that there's always something out there for you even if you don't really know what it is right now.
Right? I love that. I love how you just took it in stride and you're like, "Okay, let's see what's next." And then how
I
you
know, I was
I
just like
stay
and my
home.
husband was I have to say I know there are people out there that don't have that. I had a super supportive husband who was like, "Let's figure it out. If you wanna stay home, we'll figure it out." So, that also was very helpful, in this journey because I know some people have to fight tooth and nail to have the same journey I had, and I had a little bit more of a support, so that was definitely helpful.
Yeah, I that's so awesome. It's so great. It's so great that you got to do that and experiment with that too, just to see like how it was to be at home and then have this, little like side business to help out so you're still being social, but then you're getting to be at home with your kiddo.
Yes,
So
and that's what
great.
it was, like, I was home with them all day, and, I mean, not in the beginning, like, gosh, it probably took me 4 years to really get started, let's say, like, for real started in my business, but, just doing, like, some client care and stuff during the day when they were around or sleeping or whatever, and then at night, it was like, "Okay, babe, you're home with the kids, bye.
Yeah,
I need
yeah.
to I've been with them all day, I've done my loving, now it's time for me to go." So
Yeah.
it was like the perfect mesh, especially for someone who thought they didn't wanna have kids and didn't wanna stay home and was now staying home with kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you're like, "Oh, this is interesting." This is
Yeah, it's
a
funny
turn
how
I
life
didn't
takes
know.
you.
Yeah, yeah. I know that we talked before and we had a really good conversation about working through like your old thoughts and your shoulds, like being a parent. You want
Yes.
to share some stories about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved our conversations. So like for me, when the kids were first born, we carry so much weight from like how we grew up and what we went through and what we did, and we want them to, we have our experiences and we kind of push those on the kiddos, right? And so I didn't even know I was doing it. Most people don't, right? Like we do everything, there's so much in your subconscious that you just don't even know about that's playing out in your everyday life. And so, I have to say I was kind of a yelly mom. I had my moments. I'm gonna be real here, people. That's who I am. I probably, I would get stressed about silly things and yell about stupid things. And as I got on this growth path with myself and my business, of course, as with everything, when you start growing in one way, it affects all the ways. And I realized that my kids just really needed to be them. And it's hard because you want to take all your lessons and everything you learned and like help them, right? So you don't have to have this, but they're living a whole different life with whole different experiences and whole different personalities, right? Like they are not you. They don't have the same um things as you. So like for instance, my daughter has a tendency to suffer from anxiety in certain situations. And I probably have never really experienced anxiety to her level. I mean, I'm just kind of like go with the flow. I'm like, "Rah, what are we doing now?" Obviously, like I said, I ended up here and wouldn't have thought it. So just being able to listen to her, and instead of getting like, oh well, just don't think this way, just don't do that, as parents like to do. Like, remember we were talking about like our parents like do as you're supposed to be seen and not heard and all of that. I want to, I started changing my thoughts and hearing them, like hearing what they want and what they have. And I had to put my own experiences and my own thoughts kind of aside to let them grow and to understand what they were doing. And this came a lot with, I had to learn that with other people and everything in my growth journey, because we are so in our own minds and our own experiences that sometimes we negate other people's, right, experiences and what's going on. And especially with children, because you just want to raise these great children that everybody loves. But guess what? Nobody loves everybody. So we just need to let them be them, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And how we can go back, like not even realizing, like you said, so much in your subconscious, right? Of how you're like living your day. And when you are trying to parent, you can see that when it comes out of, oh, I should, but we should be doing this, but then kind of checking yourself and being like, why? Why should we be doing this? And let's see what works out best, right? Like, I need her to communicate, right? Your daughter needs to communicate so then you can have a better understanding. So then you can move from there versus, this should be happening, this should be happening, this should be happening. Not necessarily.
And I mean, it's horrible. Like, okay, so internet good and bad, right?
Oh,
Like they're
yeah.
telling you what's going on with your kid. But I remember I was trying to potty train my kids at like 18 months because some kid, and listen, my daughter ended up doing it that early, but I started with my son, which I should have known boys, right? But you know, I started with him. I remember one of the biggest fights I got in with my husband. I was bawling and I was like, I can't do this. He's supposed to be potty trained. And I'm not, I had all this pressure, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
because I read something on Baby Center that he could be potty. Like, what was I doing? Like, I look back on wonderful new mom Adrienne and was like, whoa, she needed some help. But that's the beautiful thing is, right? We're always learning and we're always growing. And so I look back on those experiences and I'm like, exactly what you said, right? Like we put this outside pressure of whether it was our experiences or other experiences, like, and that's another thing with social media, like you said, looking at other people like, oh, they're at the pumpkin patch. I guess we're supposed to go to the pumpkin patch. Well, let me tell you what, if your kids don't like the pumpkin patch, don't go to the pumpkin patch. Like
Right?
you don't have to.
Right.
And so I think when you remove all of that pressure and stress, and it's something I had to do for myself, right? Like I was putting all this pressure and stress on me that I had to be a certain mom or I had to be a certain businesswoman or I had to do things a certain way. And when I just started accepting myself for the flaky, outgoing, goofy girl I am, instead of like, oh, I should be more professional or I need to learn the details. Guess what? I'm never going to learn the details. If you give me a paragraph, I'm going to skim it. I'm going to tell you the gist of it. And that's all you're going to get from me. So my team and my family, my team with work, all now know if they want the details, don't come to mom. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I had to accept me for who I was first. And then I could start accepting the kids for who they were. And now this whole pressure, we need to, but also the whole my kids need to do this, need to do that has all dissipated. And we have this beautiful, happier family lifestyle of accepting each other for who they are. Now, don't get me wrong. We still have moments where I'm like, what is wrong with you? Right.
Yeah.
But like in general, we're all accepting each other and accepting our gifts and our flaws and
Mhm.
knowing that we all have them and it's okay. Like that's what if we were the same, if we all were cookie cutters, life wouldn't be so fun. So it's like, it's just been this huge growth process for me that in turn ended up a growth process for my kids and
Right.
my husband and all of us really,
I love that. I love that. That's so like my hairs are standing up on my arms. Like it's so awesome because you like the ripple effect that you can create by just like tuning into like, whoa, like let's cut the shoulds out. What does my family actually need? And like, letting go of that whole like I call it comparison trap, right? Where you
right,
oh, society you're supposed to be in the societal norm or people are going to think this and but like who cares? Who
right,
cares? Nobody knows your shoes except you. Like you
yeah,
are the only person that knows this walk. And like you said, your kids are all different. They all have their personality. They're all different personalities, all the things they're gonna, your son's different than your daughter.
uh, like huge. So like
Yeah.
we were just talking about, so my son's going to be a senior and I was like, where do you want to go? Like we'll do a big trip for each of you when you're a senior, right? And I love to travel. I love to travel, and my husband does as well. So my daughter, of course, is like Bora Bora or Paris is where we're going for me. And my son's like, can't we just go to our condo in Florida? Like he just wants to do the same
Love
old
it.
thing. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And then I was like, oh my gosh, don't, what's wrong with you? And I had a conversation with a friend and we were talking about it. And she's like, just be happy your boy wants to go anywhere with you. Right. Like,
Yeah.
so again,
Yeah.
you can just flip your thoughts at any point. Like I'm sitting here going, why can't we go to Europe, buddy? Like, let's do something big. He just wants to hang out with us on the beach. Like, why is that a bad thing? Right. But like in your head, if you're like me and you like to travel, you're like, why would you want to do that? That's silly. Why would I ever say that to my kid? He wants to hang out with me somewhere. Just go do it. So I laugh all the time about that because we have these thoughts in our own head. And when somebody has a different thought, sometimes instead of going, okay, well, it's his call and that's what he wants to do. Let's just go do it and love it. I wanted to be like, what? Like we do that all the time. Don't you want to do something different? But he's just kind of that guy that is totally loves his comforts, like not his comfort zone, but like just going to the places where he has memories and he's had good times and he knows he'll have good times again, like that's just who he is. So
Mhm.
it's just funny, like I said, even with growth, like it's still happening. Like I said, this just happened and I was looking at him like, what? And then I'm like, Adrienne. um, so it doesn't again, just so you know out there, as you're growing, it doesn't mean you've grown. You're never there. Like you're gonna keep encountering moments where you're like, oh, I've got to flip my thought, or I got to think about this, or why am I doing this? So um that's the other thing I love about growth and why I started my podcast like you was just to have other people's knowledge because man, you're always growing and there's always something else you can learn from or some great conversation you can have like we had where things just shift in your head, right? And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I could look at it this way or I could do that. So
Yeah, I really like how you said you can flip your thought at any time because that's so true. And I feel at times you can get stuck by kind of being stubborn with yourself, right? Of, like, oh no, not realizing it, but like staying in that thought when you can just back up a little bit, be a little bit more curious and be like, no, like you said, no, he wants to spend time with me in Florida.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just like and then like you said, you go with it. You go with the flow, you go with it, and then you can see then so much more you see just by letting go of, like you said, the should have whatever that thought was and flipping
Right.
the thought and then going with it. And now you're gonna have like this whole experience instead of this like, huh? What? I don't get
Right.
it. And then, I don't
So
I love that.
one of my favorite, like I had a conversation with my brother, and one of my favorite podcast episodes came from it. Was he was like, every thought you have, he called it checking it at customs. You got to check it at customs. He's like, because no matter what thought you have, you can either leave it or take it with you. And there's always two sides to every thought, right? Like you said, like you can be mad that you're not going to Europe, or you can be happy he wants to be with you at all. And then you got to pick which one you want and leave one behind and take one with you, right? And I had this, like, it was such an amazing thing because I think sometimes too, we tell ourselves like I think we talked about this the first time we talked was like when I was going into my world of business before kids, it was like I had to be a career girl, right? I had to work 9 to 5. This is what I've been told. I mean, my dad, like I said, was in the automotive industry. He was a plant manager. I mean, he would work from 3 a.m. till 3 a.m. the next day sometimes. Like he was, he worked hard. And so it was like, you got to work hard was like bore into my head. And so then I had to check that because I was like, is that the truth? Like, is this what I have to do? Right. My mom stayed home and then went back to work after we were grown. But I was just like, I had all these ideas that you had to work so hard because that's what I was told. And I was like, but can't I just like work and enjoy it and make money? And like, so I had to take that thought with me that I could, that I didn't have to work from three. And listen, it was great for my dad. I'm not, again, no judgment. Everybody gets to choose what works for them, but I knew that wouldn't work for me. And so I had to decide to think differently, that like I could have a job at home and stay with my kids and make good money and help other people find the life they love by doing what I'm doing. I had to change that in order to move forward with where I wanted to be in my life. So I think so many of us get caught up in things like we said, that subconscious, like this was the life I led. This is what I watched my mom and dad do. It was either work or don't work. Like she didn't work, until she went back to work. Whereas I was like, can't I just do both? Like, can't I work and not work at the same time? Which is
Yeah.
exactly what I found. So when you're open to possibilities, whatever the possibility is that sounds like it'll suit you, that's great. And if 9 to 5 suits you, that's great. Like, it's just each person has to determine that for themselves. And like, I'm so glad I went through this work because I know eventually my kids are going to be looking at jobs and I'm going to be able to help support them to figure out, what do you really want? I mean,
Mhm.
some people want to travel all the time. They want to be gone from home all the time. Some people don't. Like, none of it's right, none of it's wrong. It's just you and what you want. And so once I could take a step back and figure out what I really wanted, everything came so much easier when I could be me, know what I wanted, and know that not everybody wants that. And also, not everybody will allow themselves to have exactly what they want. And I get to choose whether I will do that or
Yeah. So three things I want to say that are awesome that you said. So one, okay, the first one is, when you were like, you step back and question it, like, do I want to work all the time? But I don't, like questioning it is the first friggin' step, being curious and questioning it,
not.
and
For
then making a
sure.
decision, like checking it at customs. Do I want this and do I want that? And then going with that. And then just like how you were saying, easier when you go with the flow with what feels good to you, it is easier
It
because
is.
it lights you up. It totally like it fuels your fire and you end up going and it like outside looking in, other people might look at you and be like, what? She's crazy. She's doing all this stuff. She's busy, blah, blah, blah. But to you, it's like, this is easy peasy, man. Because this is what I want to
This
do. This
is I'm
lights
in
me
my
up.
zone.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, you're in it. You're in the zone. You're doing the thing. And it doesn't feel hard. It doesn't feel like a lot of work. It's super easy, smooth, and fun
Right.
because you're
And that's
listening
the
to
thing.
you.
And there are people who work, 3 a.m. till 3 a.m. and love it. And it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like work, right? To me, that would, because I really like my sleep people. But
Me too, girl. Me too.
but you know what I'm saying? Like everybody's different. And I think that sometimes we get caught up that like, oh, if you want to make a bunch of money, you got to be an entrepreneur that works nonstop and is on call all the time. And I mean, there's just all these things, or you have to start at the bottom and work your way up in a company. There's all these different thoughts, and we all have different ones, right? Because we experience different lives with different situations, different people. And so it was really hard for me to grasp that all this stuff in my head that I had told myself was the right way or what you should do or what it's supposed to look like was just crap I made up, that like my brain made up along the way, right? Like
Yeah.
none of it's truth. It's the truth my brain created, but I can change that truth at any time. It's just crazy when you learn it's all in your head.
Oh, I know. I know. It's like the fog is lifted and now you can see all these things and you're like, "What? What
Yes.
do you mean?" And then you start doing it and you just get on that train, if you will, and you're just like, "Oh yeah, yep, let's keep going. I want to see what's next. Question things, curious, make
Yeah.
decisions." Like the whole, checking it at customs thing, like when you're describing it, it sounds like a lot, but when you practice it, it starts like just it's faster, faster, faster every time. And then you just automatically go through customs without
Right.
even having to do the whole thing. And you're like, yes, moving on. Here
And
we
if you
go.
know that every decision you make, even if it doesn't work out the way you hoped, right? Like what, because like, listen, we all know we don't control much in our lives but our thoughts. I mean, let's be honest. Like
Oh,
things
yeah.
are going to happen to us. We have no control over that. But what I realized was like, in that moment, as things are happening and all these things go on around you, you just get to choose how you're going to show up through each of these steps. And like you said, as your growth happens and you start making decisions faster, you're still going to make bad ones. But the bad ones, what you realize, taught you something else or brought you somewhere else or introduced you to something else. Like I had to realize that even when my brain gives me something and I try it and it doesn't work out as well or whatever, I have always found something in that path because I made that choice, right? Like because I decided to try this or whatever. And so I think that's the other thing is people feel like, oh, if I fail or I have a I'm doing all quotation marks because these are ridiculous things that we tell ourselves, right? Like bad idea or whatever. Um, that we failed again, quotation marks. That none of that's true. We're just learning, we're growing. So like every time something like that happens, just say I've grown. Like that's what I do. Like, oh, well, that wasn't exactly how I wanted it to go, but I've grown and I've figured some stuff out and I keep going. Right. Like, it's not, you're never failing. You're never having a bad idea. You're trying new things and you're on a growth path. And there are like, everybody's seen the path to success with all the divots. Like, that's the
Right.
path to success. So, like,
Right.
keep going. You're going to get there. We are just so hard on ourselves. And one of the things I tell people all the time is I'm like, take a picture of your best friend. And when you're talking to yourself about your bad ideas and your failures, again, quotation marks, when look at that picture of your friend and say it to her, because you wouldn't flip and say, I'm going to try to be good with my language. You wouldn't flip and say that to her, right? Like you
Right.
would not say that to her. So why are you saying it to yourself? So
Hmm.
when you're talking to yourself about the things that aren't going right in your life, what would you say to your best friend? And that's what you should say to yourself. And I just don't think we practice that enough.
I
I just,
100% agree.
yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's so true.
Or take
It's
your
so true.
kid. Like I would never look at my kid and be like, you failed. That was a dumb idea.
Right.
Like,
Right.
so I think we just need to learn to talk to ourselves the same way and give ourselves the same grace we would give someone else when they aren't like it didn't happen the way they wanted it to. Is that keep going. You're going to get there. That's exactly what we'd say. I'd look at my daughter and be like, just keep doing it. Try something else. You'll get there. You just got to find the right path. Like you're still going to get to the finish line, whatever the finish line is, right?
Yep.
But you got to keep going. You can't just stop because it didn't go the way you wanted it to.
Yep.
You're learning something. So I
Yeah,
think
that's so true. I actually just had a conversation with my middle guy about that because he was getting frustrated because something he was doing wasn't working out. And I said, "That's okay, bud. That's just not the way you're going to get there. Let's try a different way." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Let's try a different way." And he was like, "Oh," like you could tell he was like, "Oh yeah, we can try a different way." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I said, "And if that one doesn't work, that's also okay because maybe there's a different way." Like it
yeah,
doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means a different way. And you could just see his little brain like, what? Like,
yeah,
what do you mean? And just like opening up.
yeah,
And the failure thing too is kind of it's really interesting. I had somebody ask me one time, what does failure mean to you? And I could not answer that question. It was so hard for me because my mindset, which I've done work on, but my mindset has shifted to where it's a lesson. So what do I need to learn from this is what I ask myself. Like if
mhm,
something's really hard or if I'm not liking it, I'm not feeling it and I'm like F this day or whatever, I'm like what is I kind of back up like you said, I back up and question it and I'm like what is my lesson in this?
right,
There is learning or something I am gaining from this scenario and situation, which is why I'm having this experience and not necessarily thinking of it as failure. It's like either
right.
find another way what's my lesson? You know, there's
Mhm.
some shiny little light in there, even if it seems super dark, there
What
is some
next?
light in
Where
there
do I go
somewhere.
from here?
Right,
Any of those.
right,
Yes. Yes.
right. So it's funny how, like you said, flip your thoughts at any time. Flip your thought at any time, because it's funny how when in like the doom and gloom or the hard stuff, it's easier for us to get stuck there and be like rah rah rah. You know, we don't want to see the shiny light, but we have to choose to flip the thought to be like, no, there's something here that I can, that can like brighten just a little bit, or what the lesson is. And sometimes it might not even be in the situation. You might get through it and look back and be like, oh, there it is. I
Yeah,
see
I
it
mean,
now.
and sometimes years later, like
Yes,
sometimes it's not even when it's happening, like it feels miserable when it's happening and you're like, "Oh, I don't see how there's a lesson in this." And
totally.
then 3 years later you look back and you're like, "Oh, I'd never be here if that wouldn't have it doesn't always show right away either, you know?
Right.
And so I think, that's where that grace that we offer our kids and our best friends that we don't always offer ourselves comes in.
Absolutely.
You
And I
should be
think
your
I
best
think
friend. You should be like your
yes,
kid. You need to tend to
yes,
yourself the way you're tending to everybody else.
yes, absolutely. I feel like our kids help us with that. They're like little mirrors of things, right? When they're doing certain things, you're like, oh, sometimes you have to step back and be like, yep, I needed to
Oh,
hear
yeah.
that.
I remember my daughter one time, like, was throwing a temper tantrum, and I looked at her and I was like, "Oh, that was me. I saw everything I do right there."
Right? And you're like, okay, what are we gonna do with
Oh,
this?
those are the bad mirrors. That's when you're like, "Oh, I like it when you're like, just got straight A's and you're like, Mom, look at my straight A's." I'm like, "Oh, I helped you with that. I did that." And then you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that mirror wasn't as pretty as the other
Yeah, you're like, I don't know about that one.
one." But I mean, that's been the really fun part about this journey with the kids and the growth is that like as I grow, they grow. And also just like, gosh, loving them for who they are and seeing their traits that are amazing instead of looking for the ones that, and a lot of times it's what you wished you would have had. Like if you didn't have confidence as a kid, you're trying to get your kids to have some major confidence. Or if you didn't, instead of just realizing like all those things that they have will inevitably serve them. Like I love that strength finder book, right? Because there's so many strengths and you find out your top 5 and half the people you hang out with, they're not even close to your top 5, right? Like they're totally different things because that's how we help each other, right? Where
Mhm.
you excel, someone else might be like that's one of their weaknesses and then one of your weaknesses is their strength. And so I look at that and I'm like if we didn't let people be them, we'd be in a really sad spot, right? Because you wouldn't have the like, I'm not super creative. So these creative people that just like I say something and they're like, oh, you should make your slogan this. I'm like, who even thinks of that? Like, like my mind is logical.
Right.
So it's so fun. So let your kids be them. It's real hard when you're in it, man, because I remember, and before I did any life coaching or any work on myself, I remember just worrying about like, are they going to turn out okay? Instead of knowing, of course they're going to turn out okay. They're going to have good qualities and they're going to have great traits. You just have to accept their good qualities and great traits, even though they're
Yeah.
not yours.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said that, because it's so true what you taking from your childhood and then like trying to instill it in your children, it's like the pattern that you're just passing, and you have to be like,
Mhm.
hold
It's a
on.
great yeah, we talked about that the first time, like, you have to stop the patterns and, realize that, like, we just do things because, like I said, our brain thinks that that's what's supposed to happen, but you can change that at any time and say, "No, kiddos, like, you get" like, even her with her anxiety, it's taught me a lot about dealing with other people, like, it's given me a little bit more compassion because I just don't like, because like I said, I'm living my day 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I got to go do this. Oh, so I'm not sitting here thinking about something that's like, I didn't realize she would have anxiety about something 3 days away. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing in 3 days. Like if I didn't have a calendar every morning to look at, I wouldn't even know what I was doing. But like her mind doesn't do it that way. Like she
Right,
knows exactly what she's doing when she's detailed. I'm not.
right.
Um, and so I think all of that is just so beautiful, right? Like if when we can start learning that everybody shows up differently, and that's the beauty of it. So
Yeah, shows up differently. I love that. That's so true. And have more compassion and more awareness and more, of just kind of like curiosity around the situation can, like you said, can open it up for other people. And then you're like, oh, okay. I get it
Yeah.
now.
Well, it's just like our world's getting, so hostile about opinions. Like it's like one way's right and one way's wrong. And the beauty of it is if you can put the emotion aside and have a conversation, people are smart. Like they have good ideas. And even if you don't agree, you can take something away from that when you don't let all that charged emotion of like somebody has to be right. Nobody's right. It's so many things are opinion, right? Like when
Yeah.
you look at the political things out there and things like that, it's like if you could take the emotion away and try somebody trying to show that they're right, listen, find that compassion that somebody's had a different lifestyle than you and is thinking just a little bit differently.
Mm,
And I think that's the hard part, right? Is like because
yeah.
so many people don't understand that they're thinking this way because their life experiences are so different than yours.
Mhm.
And again, that's exactly what happened with my kids too. Their life experience, I didn't even know, here's a goofy instance. So my son all of a sudden quit liking cheese, like in 4th grade. Just I didn't know anything about it. Nothing. So I was like, "What?" I kept trying to give him cheese. Like, "Nope, don't like cheese, don't like cheese." Like all of a sudden. I was like, "Okay, I guess he doesn't like cheese." Come to find out, he is literally, what was he, a freshman or sophomore? And we're out and Sydney orders Bosco sticks and he's like, "Oh, I hate those." I was like, "What? Why do you hate Bosco sticks?" He's like, "In 4th grade, I started choking on one at school and the teacher had to come and like smack my back. And, I was so embarrassed." So he didn't hate cheese. He hated what cheese made him embarrassed at school. And so
Right.
I didn't even find this out till what is that, 4, 5, 6 years later?
Yeah.
And so, like, that whole experience changed so much for him, and yet I didn't even know about it until he finally decided to share with me 6 years later. So, like,
Right.
the whole time I was like, I kept shoving cheese at, like, I'm like, "Come on, buddy, you just don't." He's like, "No, no, he never told me why." And that's the like, isn't that crazy? Like, such a tiny example of how people have these traumatic experiences they may or may not have told anyone about, that have shaped the way they've lived because that
Right.
that one moment was so vivid. And I mean, he was so embarrassed and so probably scared that he was choking and the whole thing,
Yeah.
that 6 years, six
As
years.
well as how close, like as moms, right? We feel like there's time where we have to check ourselves because we feel like we know everything. We know everything about our children. We know what's going on with our children. We know all the things, right? We don't,
Oh God, no.
right? And that situation right there, you're like, wait, what? When did this happen? And you're probably like, this is like how many, just like you said, like how many, what? Like you had to, you're probably like,
Yeah,
oh my
and
God.
never once during any of it was he like, "Oh, yeah, I choked on cheese," because then I probably would never offer it to him or be like, "You
Right.
should get over this," and I probably would have explained like, "Hey, buddy, when you have, Bosco sticks that have chunk cheese that have hardened because you're at school, yeah, they can be a little rough if you don't chew them good enough." Like,
Yeah.
and he was little, like, right? He's in 4th grade. I mean, it's just so funny, and like you said, I think that's with everybody. I mean, even ourselves sometimes, right? Like, there are things that happen that are traumatic that we sort of bury, but they do create some of these thoughts in our heads that have become that subconscious that's telling you that this is right or this is wrong or this is that. And so I think we have to give ourselves grace. Like I said, grace and compassion to ourselves and other people, that like these little small things that, like, on a whole, that is not traumatic what happened to him when you think of trauma, but it was in a way, and for
Right.
him,
Yeah.
right? So there's small traumas that happen to people all the time. We always think trauma, big trauma, but there's small traumas that was very hard for him at 4th grade. Like, I'm sure now if that happened, he'd probably laugh it off. Like, I mean, you'd be a little scared, but he'd probably laugh it off with his friends. But like in that moment, it wasn't. And so that's shaped him a little bit. It's added layers that I didn't know about, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah, so I just think, that's the biggest thing I've learned is like listening to people, not letting that emotion because I think when emotion comes in, right, we want to speak our truth so badly and so passionately that we don't hear what the other person's saying. And that was a lot of what I had to do with the kids, right? Like I'm getting mad and I'm like, why aren't you doing this? And instead of listening to their answer, I'm like, just do it now, right? Like I didn't even hear why they weren't doing it or what.
Yeah.
So it's really taught me to try to, like you said, question, when you're getting mad and you're like, why do you not do this? Maybe just take a breath and go, hey, is there a reason this like can't happen? Like, what is it? And one time I found out with my kids, they're like, well, because when you tell me to do it, it pisses me off. So then I don't want to do it. It's like, oh, great. So then what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And so we had a good conversation about it. And they were like, um, what if we just make it where, when I get home from school, you give me an hour? Okay. And then I said, okay, great. And then after that hour, if it's not done, I'm allowed to say something and you can't take it as you're going to get mad and like hold it against me and never do it.
Right.
And it worked. It was just, they didn't like the minute they walked in the door, me being like, don't forget you have to do this. They knew it, and then when I said it, they were like, "Well, now I don't wanna do it because you just told me what I had to do."
Yeah.
So, it's just funny when you listen and hear people that you can usually find common ground or a way to make it work if we just understand the other side, where their subconscious is coming and where your subconscious is coming to bring that together. So,
Yeah, and how you receive it too, right? Because like, to us, we're just reminding them like, "Hey, please remember to take out the garbage or do the dishes or what have you." So for us, it's like, okay, we're doing our reminder really quick, but to them, they're like, nag, nag, blah, blah, blah. Like they're not receiving it as like, "Oh, mom's just reminding me." They're receiving it
right.
as like, "I hate that." So it's like also, like you said, being understanding and kind of like ebb and flowing with that. Like, okay, like they said, I need my
Yep.
time and then
Yep.
we can do that. And that's interesting that they said that because also my littles, when they come home from school, they've also voiced to me, as well as my son when he comes home from work, that they need 30. They're like, can we just have 30 minutes of like nothing, like where we just go free, do whatever they need to do for 30 minutes, and then we can start, saying what we need to do or where we're going to go or what have you. So it's like after school or after his work, it's like 30 minutes of nothing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because
then
they've
we
been
can do
going all
stuff.
day and you know, they've been on all day.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like they also are like, I need, and we don't understand that because like I know I've been home all day. So I'm like, here are the things that they need to do.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so when they walk in, I'm like, this and this. I got my list. I've done all the other things. This is what needs to be done. Right. Yeah. That's so
Yep.
interesting. And it literally just takes that conversation um of both people being not charged in the moment.
Yep.
Right. Like,
Yep.
because when we get my friend always calls it triggered. She's a mom and she's like, I just look at my kids and I'm like, you're triggering me right now. And her kids have learned like they walk away and they'll talk about it later. Cause like that means to her, like that to them, okay, this isn't going to end well. Mom can't handle this conversation right now. So I'm like, sometimes just having keywords too, just saying like, I'm overwhelmed right now and this can't happen in this moment. Give me 20 minutes and then let's, like you said, give me 30 minutes when I get home from school and then we can visit this conversation. I mean, because we all have different things that overwhelm us and like different, like I was the opposite. I came home from school. I wanted to get my homework done now. So the rest of the day I had nothing to worry about. Right.
Me too. Me
My
too.
my son, like, don't ask me to do my homework right away. I want to do it before I go to bed. I'm like, why? Aren't you tired? But again, I'm taking my personal DNA and chemistry and makeup and forcing it on him. If he gets it done, what do I care when he does it? I
But
just
yeah.
always was like, do it right when you get home. And it drove them nuts. And again, it wasn't a conversation till I grew more and listened to them that they both are kind of night people. I can't understand it. Like, I will not do work at 10 o'clock at night ever.
Yeah. My
So,
oldest is like that too. He's a 10 o'clock at night or two. And I'm like, what? I don't get it, but it's the same. It's the same
yeah.
thing. And the keyword thing, mine is South America. If I say
South
South
America,
America,
what?
yeah. If I say South America, I'm like, that is it. South America. They're like, they know it's like, I'm, because it's like a joke. And they're like, why South America? And I'm like, because I want to drive there and not come back
Oh,
right now.
I
So,
like it.
like,
That's a
let's
very
stop
good one
talking
because
about it.
that doesn't come up in normal conversation, right? So that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, I was really frustrated. And I was like, I just want to go to South America. And I'm like, that is it. That's my word. When I say South America, that is
That
it.
means mom's
We are
about to get in her
done.
car. Bye.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna leave and go.
And I think I also learned that too. There was so much emotion I tried to hide. I know that our parents' generation was a little bit that way too. Like they didn't want to share when they were sad or things happened that weren't
Yeah.
great. And um, so I try to find that happy middle of letting them know that being sad, being angry, these are normal emotions. We don't have to hide them. Like it's okay to be sad sometimes. It's okay to feel defeated sometimes. Like you're going to have those feelings, so don't ignore them and know that like when somebody else has them, yeah, they're passing. Like it's not going to sit with them forever. So just listen for a minute and, be there for somebody who's having, those thoughts or those moments. And then, the next day, like they wake up and they feel totally different. And so I think them learning that like these emotions are ever passing. um they don't stick with you forever. You will, I mean, like, how many of us have been to a funeral and then right after you're laughing and you can't even understand how you can laugh because you're so sad, right? Like that's the beauty of our emotions, is like they are ever changing. And so teaching kids that like this won't be with you always, and you don't have to carry it with you always. And other people are going to have it too. I just think it's so good for them instead of hiding it, like keeping it away. And I think there's a lot of people who think like, well, in order to look like a professional or whatever, like I can't cry, I can't do this. And as soon as we started letting that happen more in our family too, I feel like it's easier to talk about those things when we get triggered, or when, those things are happening that we're like, oh, we need to have a conversation because clearly when I do this, this is doing this to you. This isn't working out well. What could we do differently? Like you said, what can I do differently?
Yeah, and it's more comfortable, like, sharing emotion is more comfortable, it's not it doesn't feel as the word that wants to come to me is icky, right? Like, or you have to stop crying or you can't, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen as much the more you practice and do that and be okay with it, then you feel okay to express your emotions, which is great because then you're not, shoving
Yeah.
them down and not dealing with them, you need to feel.
And learning that like you have your safe people, right? These are the people I bring my, so yeah, you don't want to cry at school when somebody's being mean to you at school, so come home and cry to me. That's your
Yep,
safe space. So
yeah,
act tough, pull your tough, when you're at school, and then come home and let that all out. Like, giving people that, we all have that. We all have that friend that we feel super safe with, or husband, or whatever. And the kids need that too, because it's
absolutely.
it's even harder when you're like, they don't even understand emotions yet, right? Like they're just coming because their subconscious is already like throwing things at them. They have no idea why they're mad right now. They just are, right? And like you
Yeah,
said, we're constantly questioning, like, what's making me mad? Why am I mad right now? We're doing that. They're not. They're just like, this emotion came so fast, so hard, they're teenagers or little,
right.
even little kids, toddlers, whatever. They started throwing temper tantrums early on. They were crying before they could talk, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah, I mean, it's that's the best part about, being a mom though, is when you can find the fact that they have all this other amazing stuff that maybe you do or don't have, but they're learning and growing in their own way, and appreciating them for exactly who they are is just, it's just a great thing. It's
Oh, yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah,
hard. Don't get me
it is.
wrong.
Mhm. It is. But when you like, look back or look at the situation or look at how they handled it or something comes up and then you see it, you're like, "Oh man, this is so great." It's like so great to
Yeah.
see how much they've grown and see what they do and see how they transform into something that you're just like, "Yes, I love
Yes.
this."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, I really really want to touch on a little bit more about your podcast and I want to talk about Tastefully Simple because I
Oh
really think
yeah.
that would be something that, other ladies would love to hear about. So tell us more about those two things.
Yeah. So my podcast was literally just, I love direct sales so much. Like I just said, I don't feel I would be the person I am. I don't feel I would have the life I have. So my podcast is really supporting people like female entrepreneurs. I do have a lot of people that aren't in direct sales, but it's a lot of just, some of it is more technical, like how do you do your client care, those types of things, tips and tricks, but a lot of it's mindset. I get a lot of great speakers on there that we just kind of talk about ways to flip your thoughts, and just feel good conversations like this where you can just learn from each other and grow. So I really love that. So it's just kind of a labor of love. Like I said, it's a beautiful thing that has, I'm that way. I like a lot of logic with my mindset. So that's kind of what my podcast is. So I love that. And so that's Adrienne Talks is my podcast. Please feel free to come on over. We have a Facebook group that we chat in, or just you can listen on Spotify and app, I podcast and all that stuff. And then Tastefully Simple, yeah, that has been, truly my blessing. I help families get to the dinner table. We are all so busy, and it's not easy to do that. And so, we have meal kits that just some are based for the air fryer, the slow cooker, and it just makes life super simple because it's actually funny. I sell food and help people cook for a living, and I don't even love cooking. So that's what I tell people. I'm like, trust me, it's easy and delicious, or I wouldn't do it because I love food and I don't love work. So,
Yeah, yeah. I remember you saying too, it's not like other meal kits that get mailed to your house that have like everything in it. This
right.
is a
Because,
little different.
yeah. So, what I love about ours is so many people have picky eaters, right? So, when you order on one of those online ones, they're sending you your groceries. So, if you love this recipe, but it has salmon, which I love salmon, but tons of people hate salmon. So, I come to find out. It has salmon, you can't order it but with salmon. So our recipes, I am your consultant, so I help you go. So like I make all of mine with chicken and salmon because I love salmon, but my husband loves chicken and the kids eat both. Um, so I make it with both things. So I get to buy my groceries, I get to buy my food, but they give me the recipes and the checklist of what I need and what I have and all the flavor. So they have the marinades and the seasonings, and our stuff has no MSG, and like most, I think 87% of our line does not have gluten, all like, so it's healthy. Our seasonings are all natural. So it's a great way to get your meals on the table, buy what you want and only what you want. So you don't like mushrooms, they send you mushrooms, you throw them in the trash. Now you just don't buy them. And then
Right.
also a lot of people have trouble with a lot of those the where they're shipping the food right to you. I mean, it's been sitting in a grocery, then it's in a box with ice. So by the time you get it, you have maybe a day or two to eat it. So we also have freezer meal directions so that when you get your stuff, you can throw it all in a bag, stick it in the freezer, and pull it out when you're ready to eat it. So on our recipes. So
I love that. I
yeah.
love
So
that.
it's just been great. I love it. I love people. I love the food. I love, like I said, I love direct sales. You just get to meet so many fun people and get out there. And um, so yeah. So that's Tastefully Simple. Feel free to check me out at yoursimplemeals.com. Or I also have a Facebook group, Your Simple Meals, and I do lots of like quick TikTok cooking videos and things like that to show people like dinner doesn't have to be hard or I wouldn't be doing it.
I saw you do one. I watched one of them the other day. I was like, "Oh, this is so great." And it shows you exactly how easy it is and what you did. And your daughter was in there too, sneaking
Oh, yeah,
every
on
once in a
Mondays, I
while.
go live with my daughter, and she just laughs and makes faces at me and gives me side eye, which is great.
I love it. I loved it. I was like, "Oh, this is great. These are fun."
We're just 2 crazy people in the kitchen who don't know what we're doing, so
And videotaping it. You're like, "Here we go. We're gonna tape this, record it,
this
put it up." I love it.
like I said, I had to learn the long, hard way that just being you, there's gonna be people who love it, and there's gonna be people who think you're a hot mess express and don't want any part of it, and that is okay.
It is. It is. That is definitely okay.
You'll attract what you're looking to, whatever you put out, you attract back. So if you're being you, you're going to find the people who truly love you. And if you're trying to be somebody else, you're going to attract people who love somebody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. You have so many good gems to share. I'm excited about all this. I can't, I can't wait. I really want to look into more into Tastefully Simple because I feel like solving the dinner table is like every friggin' woman's thing. Like it's
Yes.
dinner, like all the decisions and then dinner is like, I don't want to.
Yeah, of
So
course
it's
not. And
quick, easy, and all of like you said, like I'm excited to check that out. So I'm gonna make sure that I have all that in the show notes too. So if other people want to check it out, they can as well. Um,
absolutely.
I always like to ask my guests because as mamas and women and businesses and all the things, we wear so many different hats and we have so many different, traits and characteristics. And I always like to ask, what is your superpower that you would like to share with us today?
Superpower. Um, Honestly, I think my superpower is just being able to have fun in almost every situation. Like I always try to find the good. It's a hard thing for some people, and I feel like it's very natural for me. So I love just the joy in life. There's so like no matter what's going on around you, there's always something. Like I have a goofy dog that like falls over, like tries to jump on the couch and hits the couch. And I'm like, God puts all these beautiful things in our vision. Because when the hard things are happening, you have to find the good, happy things too. And that's the beauty of it. There's always something. So I feel like that's kind of my superpower is just being able to take moments and enjoy the goofy and the fun in all moments because life's hard and it deals you hard hands. And so when you can see those things, it really makes it a little bit easier knowing that like I said, emotions are passing and so you might as well just have fun because that's life, man. You only get one of them and I'm always like, let's just have fun with it. So
Yeah. I love that. That's such a good one. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really
I
good
know
one.
I can't I'm excited to hear some other people's because you said you've never had the same. So I'm like, I can't wait to hear some of the other superpowers because
Yes.
I'm sure that is everybody's so
I
different.
yes, I have yet to have a repeat. So I love that. And I love that everybody has their own, everybody has their
Yeah.
own and they're willing to share it. So it's so great. It's so great.
Yeah. And I think that's what's beautiful about it all, right? Like we all have those things that we can bring to life. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all of your little tidbits. I loved our conversation today. It was great.
oh my gosh, me too. I'm so thankful I got to come on with you and enjoy this time. And I hope your listeners take something away. I'd love to hear what. So when this is posted, please, respond to us and let us know what you loved about this conversation. Cause again, I'm like you, I love hearing what people take away and it's always something different, right?
Yeah,
And they always
yeah, it's fun. It's so fun. Yes.
implement it in a different way. So
Yes. Thank you.
yay. Thank you.